Gaming rivalries have been a mainstay in the medium for decades now. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe to MojoPlays and click on the links in the description to vote on upcoming content. One of the most famous and current rivalries is Sony vs. Microsoft, and that's been raging since Xbox's debut in 2001, with many people debating the pros and cons of both the PlayStation 4 now and Xbox One, or in recent cases the PS4 Pro versus the Xbox One X. Great name. Of course, other rivalries exist as well, including but not limited to PC versus console, a rivalry that will probably never end. And while these rivalries may be a part of gaming culture today, that hasn't always been the case. The concept of taking sides all started with two little companies named Sega and Nintendo, and it remains to this day the most important video game rivalry of all time. The rivalry between the two companies contains two major components: power of their respective consoles and their games library. Issues of power were immediately relevant. After the NES destroyed Sega's SG-1000, Sega hit back with the Master System, a more powerful console that was again trampled by the Nintendo Entertainment System. Not willing to throw in the towel just yet, Sega decided to release another console called the Mega Drive, also known as the Sega Genesis in North America. The Genesis was a 16-bit console, which for the time meant it had super detailed graphics, extremely vibrant colors, and complex games the likes of which were never seen before on home consoles. Sega was proud of their system, and to steal Nintendo's audience, which was particularly high since the release of the SNES, they began an anti-Nintendo campaign that slandered the competition and promoted their system as the superior piece of technology. Their famous slogan, "Genesis does what Nintendo don't," was one of the very first instances of a direct offensive. Sega even touted the term blast processing, a buzzword that allowed their console to sound vastly superior to Nintendo's supposedly childish toy. Later, Sega would release two add-ons for the Genesis, the Sega CD and Sega 32X, both of which failed to find success, but showed that they were always hunting for that new piece of technology, that elusive boost in power. To Sega, remaining technologically up-to-date and relevant has always been an important factor in their business model.
It's more powerful than 3DO.
Alright, baby.
40 times more than Super NES.
Today, gaming companies live in relative harmony, at least comparatively. While there is still some friendly back and forth between Sony and Microsoft, they mostly coexist with each other, allowing us to live in a time of relative peace. However, this definitely was not the case in the early 90s. Here was Sega directly challenging Nintendo, even disrespecting their technology and lauding themselves as the far superior company. It was not only exciting to witness two gaming behemoths battle it out, Windows versus Mac style, but it also provided anticipation for the future. While modern gamers love to compare specs and argue about which console is technically superior, this was a time when the companies themselves outright told you which was the better console. They were straight up saying, "We do what the competition cannot, and here are the graphics to prove it." It was an exciting time to be a gamer, not only because of all the classic games, but because of the exciting potential and seemingly limitless future. These companies were bringing science fiction to the present, and it allowed us to meet the future head-on in our living rooms. Now, when was the last time we as gamers felt as excited and hopeful? Despite being the most powerful console though, the Genesis was still trampled by the NES due to its stellar library. In a fantastic representation of power versus games, sales of the Genesis were initially very slow in Japan because of Nintendo's Super Mario Bros. 3, released only 6 days prior. People didn't want to buy a new console, either because it was too expensive or because they were too busy with Mario on their current one. Suddenly, Sega realized that no matter how great their console might be, they would never compete without games, or a mascot of their own. Their previous mascot, Alex Kidd, didn't have nearly the same pull as Mario, and so Sega concocted a new character who would speak to the fast and energetic youth and who would take advantage of the Genesis' speed and technological capabilities. They created Poochie.
He's edgy. He's in your face.
Sonic, whose first game, Sonic the Hedgehog, was released in 1991.
Now, get Sonic free when you buy a Sega Genesis system at its new price of $149.99.
Their creation was an instant success. It boosted the sales of the Genesis, which outsold the SNES 2-1 during the 1991 holiday season. By 1992, Sega owned 65% of the home console market, which made it the first time in 6 years that Nintendo didn't hold the majority share. It was a perfect blend of technology and character. It's not often that one single game or character redefines the entire gaming market and steamrolls the competition, and we could probably count those influential games on one hand. Perhaps not since Halo in 2001 has a company and a game made such an impression on the gaming landscape. Today, exclusives are touted as being an enormous factor in a console's commercial performance and cultural influence. For example, many people argue that the PlayStation 4 vastly outsold the Xbox One not because of Microsoft's disastrous pre-release advertising, but because of its exclusives. Games like Bloodborne, The Last of Us, and Uncharted continue to be revered on the PS4, while the Xbox One's exclusives have failed to make a significant impact. Exclusives had been important before, like Super Mario Bros. 3 briefly delaying the success of the Genesis, but the introduction of Sonic and the resulting rivalry proved just how influential they could be on the gaming market. Suddenly, every company realized that they needed their own killer app in order to stay relevant.
That was cool!
Luckily, the story has a happy ending, at least for Nintendo. After Sega left the console market due to dwindling influence, it was basically announced that the rivalry between Sega and Nintendo had ended. Sonic Advance was released in North America for the Game Boy Advance on February 3, 2002, and was the first instance of Sonic appearing on a Nintendo console. 1 week later, a port of the Dreamcast title, Sonic Adventure 2, was released on the GameCube. Not only did they advance their home console market, these two titans were now coexisting, proving that games can technically come before bitter rivalry. While the concept of video game rivalries still exists, none will ever be as important or as notable as the one between Sega and Nintendo. It gave us the most important franchise rivalry of all time in Sonic vs. Mario, a rivalry that proved the importance of killer software, and that one sole, influential title can reinvent the entire market. Their rivalry was not only fun to watch, it also revolutionized the gaming landscape and helped pave the way for the future of the medium. It is truly the greatest and most important video game rivalry of all time. Thanks for watching MojoPlays. Be sure to subscribe and click on the link in the description below to check out our suggestion page and vote on what content you'd like to see us cover next.